So thank you so much again for joining us. We're super excited to get started and just kind of walk you through why we love mobile home community investing. I think a fair amount of the folks on here are from Apple's investor group, which I'm part of. And I know we talk a little bit about single family homes and multifamily properties, but we don't talk a lot about mobile home communities. So hopefully this is a good opportunity for everybody. So just kind of starting off, we have our quick high-level agenda. Our goal is to get through all of the content in about 30 to 40 minutes and leave about 15 to 20 for any questions there might be. So first, we'll talk a little bit about Ryan and me, kind of our background and how we got started into mobile home communities. And then we'll talk about really the benefits of mobile home communities in general. And then we'll start talking about what we look for, how we value mobile home parks ourselves, and then some of the investment options that or ways to buy really mobile home parks. So hopefully you'll get a lot of value out of this. We're kind of trying to scrape the high level on a lot of this, but we can do follow-up sessions and feel free to reach out for sure if you want more information. So sorry, I skipped that slide. So Ryan, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thanks for joining everybody. My name is Ryan Hill. By day, I'm an elementary school principal, and actually today was our last day of school with kids. And but in my other waking hours, I'm in real estate. So I was a residential real estate agent for 13 years in Washington State, kind of in the Seattle metro area. So about $41 million in sales over that time, while still I was a principal and a teacher during that time as well. So it is possible to do this type of investing and sourcing deals even with another job. I purchased my first mobile home park about 2 years ago in Kansas. And then Brett and I and another partner, Dan, who's on our website, we purchased a second park in that same town in Kansas. It's about 30 miles south of Kansas City. And we're expanding quickly from there. So we'll share more about the other deals that we have going. And I have a biology degree from Central Washington University, master's in technology and education, and a principal certificate from Seattle Pacific University.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. So I'm Brett. As I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the call, I work for a technology company that happens to sell Apple computers. I happen to work at Apple, obviously. I have been investing in real estate for several years. I've kind of touched a little bit of everything with industrial, multifamily, single family, and then mobile home communities. I really got started about a year and a half ago, as Ryan mentioned there. And my background really is more in the finance and complex project management space. So I do a lot of corporate finance with hybrid, large scale, cross-functional project management. Studied finance at the University of Utah, and then went to business school at Duke University. So just a little bit more about us. We're currently HBR Capital, but we're actually renaming our company to Suncrest Capital. So you'll see that on our website over the next few weeks. We're going to be kind of transitioning to that new name. This just kind of has a little bit more about what we're trying to do with our communities, which is really, we like to find communities that may be a little bit more distressed, have a lot of opportunity to improve, and so just really capitalize and get the most out of the communities and bring value to the residents that live there as well. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways we've done that. These are more or less the properties we have for mobile home communities specifically. So we have a couple in Sun Valley, Idaho. Ryan and I both live in Boise. And then we're mostly focused in this Midwest section area. So we started in Kansas City. This is where some of my multifamily projects are as well. So I'm more familiar with the Midwest from that. We have a regional team that we work with that's based in Kansas City. So because Ryan and I both work full-time, it's a big deal for us to have contractors and strong team members that we trust. And we have a handful here in Kansas City that are fantastic. And so our kind of rule of thumb, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is we want to buy properties within about 3-hour radius of Kansas City so we can have that same relationship and team in place. So we're closing on 4 parks in Iowa this next month in about 3 weeks, actually. And that's one portfolio that we're buying as one kind of offering with some partners. And then we just are now putting together the Springfield, Missouri portfolio. of 3 parks. So Cedar Lane and Suburban Acres are both in the Springfield area. Rolling Meadows is actually in Branson, Missouri, which is about 40 minutes south of Springfield. What's cool about Branson is Branson itself, the metro has over 80,000 people in it, so it's relatively large-sized metro. Springfield has about 200 or so thousand, and so really it's commutable to Springfield. But the other advantage of Branson is it's actually a tourist destination that a lot of people know about. It's really close to the Ozarks, and there's a lot of shows that go on there, similar to like a Vegas-style shows. So we're really excited about that Missouri offering too, which again we're just getting started on. We kind of expect to close late July. So why mobile home communities, Ryan?
All right, we love mobile home park communities. Aside from the fact that there's some big players in it, so you've got billionaires like Warren Buffett. He owns Clayton Homes, which is the biggest mobile home manufacturer in the U.S., and he operates 2 of the biggest mobile home lenders as well. So 21st Mortgage and Vanderbilt Mortgage, and then Sam Zell. He's another billionaire. He owns the most mobile home park or mobile home lots in the U.S. So there's a lot of smart money in it. It's known as kind of a niche market by a lot. There's a lot of people that are just kind of learning about it, hearing about it. But these are the reasons that, some of the reasons we like it. Just the supply and demand aspect of it. So right now, and with COVID, it's jumped the number a bit, but about 65 million Americans live, under the poverty line. And so that the demand for safe and affordable housing is high. It's really high. We see that even in a little bit more of our rural markets, like in our Racine, Kansas. There's a ton of demand. Anytime we have a vacancy, it gets filled quickly. And part of that is that, there's about 45,000 mobile home parks, give or take, in the country. About 100 a year are shut down or are converted to other commercial purposes because there's more value in maybe redeveloping it for retail, if the lot rents are too low, that type of thing. So, and there's only about 10 mobile home communities being built a year. So you can see that the supply is going down, demand's high, and most cities don't allow new mobile home communities to be built. The recession resiliency part, during COVID, it was about 95% collections, which is, it's usually about 95 to 98% collection in normal time. So 95-ish% collections, even during COVID. It was the strongest performing commercial asset out there. Some retail businesses were getting 50 to 70% of their rent collected. So really showed, you've maybe heard it's recession resistant, but it's been proven to be so for sure. The tax benefit piece for mobile home investing, it was surprising to us to learn about it because mobile home communities, they can be segmented for a basis of depreciation. So depreciation for, say, apartments are 27 and a half years, commercial properties, 39 years. Well, mobile home communities are 15 years. And you can speed that up by doing a cost segregation, which we can go into if you have questions on what that is. So you can get a bulk of that depreciation to offset investment money upfront. So it can really help in that regard. The forced appreciation piece, which is like Brett was saying, we look for value add communities. So maybe a class D, class C, C minus community that we can infill lots, clean up, improve for tenants. It's a people business. So we want to make these great communities for the people that live there, that they're proud to be there. But in the forced appreciation piece, so say if we add a home, and Brett can talk about this a little bit more, if we look for vacant lots. So our Iowa portfolio, we have about 100 vacant lots or so. So each vacant lot that we fill with a used home it can increase what is it, Brett? $50,000 to $65,000.
Yep, and I'll show the math in a few slides on that too.
Yeah. So by infilling our vacant lots, we're increasing the value. And as we improve the properties, increasing rents slowly. We're not a believer in blasting rents super high. This is affordable housing after all. So we can talk about that more later. So we want to protect that for residents and access for people that need affordable housing. But that lot rent piece gets compressed, especially as we improve the communities. We can exit at a lower cap rate, which increases the value of the overall investment. So the other piece is mobile homes aren't actually so mobile. Once they're in there, 80% of them never move again. It costs anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, depending how far you're moving a manufactured home. So a lot of the residents don't have that type of money laying around, and so the home doesn't move. And once it's there, you can count on it for lot rent, and that factors into how we value and evaluate the parks that we look for, and low tenant turnover. So for manufactured home communities, even for say the park owned homes, and we'll talk about the difference between park owned and tenant owned homes here in a little bit. It's about 10 to 15% annually versus around 50% for apartments for turnover year over year. So a lot of reasons to really look at mobile home communities and investing in them and sourcing them. So Brett, anything to add to any of those?
No, I think you hit it. That's great. Ryan, I'm not able to watch the comments of the sharing, so if you notice any questions, just let me know.
Okay, I'll monitor
actually, I think I just noticed a couple. Does the depreciation apply to land? So it doesn't apply to land. So basically, the simple answer is you would take the purchase price and subtract the value of the land, which is generally determined through, there's obviously property tax assessments, but it's also through the cost segregation study that's valued. And then anything beyond the land is depreciable.
So mostly the infrastructure, roads, utilities, those pieces.
And what's interesting about it, so I've been involved in some multifamily projects as well. And so with multifamily, like if you think about a 100 unit apartment complex, you're like a cost segregation study is going to go through and it's going to look at like the carpet, the sheetrock, the wood, the bricks, like everything involved in it all gets a different schedule. And so depending on the type of material, it might be depreciated over a 20-year schedule, 15-year schedule, 10-year schedule. And then with the 2017 Jobs Act, that's when the cost segregation studies really became valuable, because you could now do bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation, where anything below 20-year schedule can be depreciated and counted in year one. And the reason why this becomes, so it's super valuable for real estate of any kind, but it's extremely valuable for mobile home parks, because almost everything in a mobile home park is already on a 15-year schedule, where on something like a multifamily building, a lot of that starts at a 39-year schedule. So you have a higher percentage of the cost can be depreciated in year one, which is pretty fantastic. So another question came in about cost for cost segregation study. They cost quite a bit, but it depends. So I've seen generally the quotes I've seen are in the $2,000 to $5,000 range. They do have some. There's some software you can get. So I know some CPAs have some rudimentary software that can kind of do a basic cost segregation study that will generally be good enough if you're doing like a single family or a fourplex. If you're doing a larger investment, you want to actually have a firm that's going to go on site and be certified to do like cost segregation studies. And the certification for them is pretty intense. They're not only are they engineers, but they also have to be tax professionals. So you're looking at kind of a hybrid role. And allegedly, there's only 40 or 50 people in the country that are actually certified to do cost segregation studies, so they can charge quite a bit. So, yeah. But really, $5,000 on a large mobile home project is well worth it because of the tax savings.
Yeah. So I would say for where it makes sense, like it wouldn't make sense on our smaller Kansas parks, but for our Iowa ones where we're at 273 units or lot spaces or so over the 4 parks, and we have a lot of investor dollars coming in, it makes a lot of sense to do it for something like that.
Good questions. I'll go ahead and keep going. So valuing mobile home communities. So there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of just go through a few terms first before I kind of talk through how you do evaluation of a mobile home park. So we use the term mobile home park and mobile home community interchangeably. More and more, I mean, one of the things that Ryan kind of talked about, how we're passionate about providing affordable housing and making sure that the communities we're buying, we're bringing value and improving them. So we don't love the term trailer park because it really kind of degrades what they are. And truthfully, these like mobile home parks, they still have a stigma, but it's becoming much better. So a lot of the homes you can see, like you can get homes that have quartz countertops, beautiful flooring, large space, and honestly, they can actually command better rents than luxury apartments. And a few reasons for that is that you get a better cost per square footage because you get a lot more square footage, and you can put your car right up to your home, and you're not right next to someone or on top of someone. So there's a lot of really nice value there. So I just wanted to clarify, you'll hear us use the terms interchangeably, but we try to use the mobile home community term just because it's a little bit better terminology there. So capitalization rate, this isn't unique to mobile home parks. This is something that's used across all of it of real estate. So a capitalization rate or a cap rate is a relatively objective metric that's used to determine value. So the way value is determined at a high level is you would take net operating income. I should have flipped these in order. You take net operating income and divide it by a capitalization rate. So the capitalization rate will change based on a few things. It'll change based on the quality of a park, the size of the park, the location of the park, things like that will all change the capitalization rate. So if you were buying a park that had maybe 10 or 15 units and it's an hour from the closest city, and maybe there were gravel roads and a few other things like that, the capitalization rate is going to be higher than if you're buying a home that has a mobile home park that has a swimming pool, 100 lots, public utilities are all direct billed to the tenant. That's going to command a lower capitalization rate. So that capitalization rate can kind of fluctuate. We are generally seeing most mobile home parks in the 6 to 8 cap range, depending on kind of the location. So certainly it can fluctuate on a few factors, and I would be more than happy to, if anybody sees a deal and you want my opinion on it or any feedback, you're more than welcome to email me, and I help you do a quick valuation. I just put my email in the chat there. It's just Brett, BRETT at HBRCAP or HBRCAP.com. But the end goal of me explaining cap rate is it's relatively objective and it's determined on the kind of underlying factors in the group. Net operating income is you take all of your gross income and subtract operating expenses. So mostly the only thing you're not going to include in net operating income is your debt or like your amortization. So those things are not included. So you would take, let's say you're making $1 million in revenue from rents, and then you would subtract any management fee you're paying, any maintenance, anything you're doing with like utilities, all those kinds of things are all going to be subtracted. Generally, in a mobile home park scenario, we're typically seeing expense ratios of 30 to 50%. So if you're seeing an expense ratio higher than that, then there's something going on where their operations aren't very effective. If it's below that, they're probably misstating something because 30 is super low. So quick back of the envelope math to get to NOI, if you figured out what the total gross income was and then backed out at least 30% of your expenses, that's probably going to be a safe bet on their NOI. And then again, you would divide that by the capitalization rate to get the value. And I've got a few slides in a second that'll kind of explain this a little bit more. Infill is just a simple general term for bringing in new homes. So we love buying mobile home parks that have a lot of vacant lots, meaning there's lots that don't have a home on them. And we make sure we do a lot of testing, and Ryan will go into this in a minute too, to make sure that they can sustain new homes, and so that once we bring in new homes, we can sell them and get people occupying them. So infill is just the term for bringing in new homes. Park-owned homes are, as the term is there, they're owned by the park itself. So if you're buying a park And generally, when you're looking at parks that are owned by what are referred to as ma and pa owners, they generally are going to have a lot of park-owned homes. And there's a lot of debate, honestly, in the mobile home park space, what's better. So park-owned homes, you own it. It's sort of like running a horizontal apartment complex because you're getting rent for the lot and you're getting rent for the home. So your rent is higher. We don't like that model though, because a couple of things. One, your expenses are higher because if anything breaks on the home, you're responsible to fix it. So you're responsible for all those expenses. You have to pay property taxes for them. You have to insure them. All those kinds of things are just more expensive for you as the owner. So we prefer tenant-owned homes, which means that we've sold the home to them, or a homeowner has brought their own home into the community. And in that scenario, we're still responsible for obviously providing a safe community for them to live. And we repair anything in the park. Like if something's buried and it's broken, that's us. We're responsible for that. But if it's in the home itself, they're responsible for it. And you just see a lot more pride of ownership. It's sort of like living in, like I live in a single family neighborhood with an HOA, for example, and in a tenant-owned community where everybody feels like they have ownership, it's very similar to having this HOA kind of feeling where people take pride and want to make things look better. So we prefer that model. The other thing, which I'll get into in a little bit, is when you value a park, you actually ignore the income on the home itself. You only look at the income from the lot rent. So having park-owned home income is nice because you get cash flow, but it actually doesn't help the valuation at all. So that's another reason we prefer to just have tenant-owned homes. And then
Can I jump in real quick, Brett?
Yeah, please do.
So on the park-owned home piece, your expense ratio, if it's a majority park-owned homes, you're probably looking at 45 to 55%, versus tenant-owned homes. A well-run is going to be 30 to 35% expense ratio. So just something to look for if you're actually looking for your own deals on those. There's one park in Missouri that we're looking at that's, gosh, what is it? It's over 60%. Brett, I can't remember. 60.
Oh yeah, it's almost 70%.
Yeah.
Expense ratio.
Yeah, and there's value in that because you can bring that down, over time with improvements. But like Brett said, there are some people that they believe in mostly park-owned homes, and the model can work if you have well maintained and you're not putting a whole lot back into those, and you have somebody watching for damages, and if they need new furnaces or whatever it is, you potentially can make more in park-owned homes, but it takes a lot more time and person power to make those work.
And I would also say, if a park has a lot of park-owned homes, that's another reason the capitalization rate might be higher, cap rate, because people don't generally want to buy a park with park-owned homes. They want to buy something that's tenant-owned because it's just easier to manage.
So good question. For park-owned homes, it says, did we mean park-owned homes won't add up to valuation? So the lot rent amount for a park-owned home adds to the valuation, but anything above lot rent. So if lot rent's $300, but they're getting $800 for the total rent, then you should just be valuing it off the $300. That's something to watch for, because if you're looking for some parks, either an unsophisticated seller or somebody that's maybe trying to get away with a little more than they should on the valuation, they'll use the entire amount of that park-owned home rent versus just the lot rent, which is what most banks will use as their appraisal or lending. They're not going to look at what the home rent is necessarily.
Yep. So generally, and I'll show you again when we get to the kind of the math slides here, but from a net operating income standpoint, which is the major impact to the value, you're only looking at the lot income. The one caveat I'll give to that is we will sometimes pay extra for the homes themselves. So if the park owns 20 homes, those 20 homes may be worth $200,000. So you would buy the park for maybe, and in fact, this is what we're doing on our Iowa portfolio. We're buying the park for 6.2 million. And then the homes in the park are worth a little over 200,000. So the total acquisition price is 6.4, but 200,000 of that's the home themselves. Again, that's not the income, but it's the homes. So another question came in, is rent to own common? The answer is yes, they're very common. So there's a few different ways to finance mobile homes. There's several mortgage companies that specialize in financing manufactured housing, including 21st Century Mortgage, which Ryan alluded to earlier. That's the one that's actually owned by Berkshire Hathaway or Warren Buffett's company. And they'll actually, it's just like a traditional mortgage company that finances the manufactured home for them. And then the other option is doing like a rent to own or lease to own option where the park owns the home and they're selling it over time. And we try to do a little bit of a blend. The advantage of doing the mortgage option is that you don't have to deal with any of the cash flow there or any of the like payments or collections or anything like that. They've checked their credit, they've done all the background, they've got skin in the game there. And then you also get your capital back. So if you sell a home that's financed, so let's say we sell a home for $50,000, if 21st Century Mortgage is buying that or financing that, we're going to get the $50,000 back right away, which lets us go and recycle it to buy another manufactured home to then repeat and sell it again. So it helps us infill faster if we can finance them out. But the rent to own or lease to own programs are also beneficial because they're still, again, they treat it like it's tenant owned because they feel the ownership, they're building equity in the home, but you're still getting kind of some cash flow. So it's a little bit of the best of both worlds there. How do you convert POH to TOH? How do you encourage residents to buy the home, Ryan?
Yeah, if you're buying a park that has a bunch of park-owned homes, you can enter into that and offer them, a rent-to-own type of system, or if you think they have the credit and down payment, using one of the financing companies. So offering that up front, you can do that for sure. And just, I think for like our Kansas park, we just showed the difference. Even if we are doing the financing essentially for a rent to own, the payment is about the same as, so the example in there is $800. The payment was still about the same, but a percentage or anything above lot rent was going towards their home payment. But they're also responsible for anything that breaks or improvements to the home, whatever it might be. But in that example, we're giving them essentially a 0% financing. So after that's paid in 3 to 5 years, maybe, they're only paying the lot rent. So maybe a $300 lot rent. And so that is their ongoing payment after that. So that can be appealing to some. Some don't want to deal with any of that. They don't want to deal with the maintenance. So you're not going to convert them. So you may have to wait until either they choose to leave after the lease is over, or if it's month to month, and if they're a problematic tenant, you can find different ways to separate and bring in somebody that's willing to do a purchase or a lease to own.
And then the final two terms here, just looking at time, I want to make sure we're moving along here, are ratio utility billing system, or RUBS, and submetering. These are very similar. The concept is essentially residents and we actually love finding parks like this, by the way, where the park is paying for all utilities. So the park's paying water, gas, rent, water, gas, sewage, electric, like all those utilities are paid for by the park. You can do one of two things. You can do a sub-metering where you actually have like taps installed at the meters, and then that's actually metered out, and you get reports. Like for water, for example, there's a company called Metron, and Metron has SIM cards installed in each of the meters, and so you actually get a report every 10 to 15 minutes of the water usage. So you can very easily say unit 20 owes this much, unit 25 owes this much. That's great, but it's also a little bit more complicated and more expensive to set up. So the other option you can do is RUBS. And so RUBS is essentially where you take the total bill. So let's say it's $500 bill for water for the month, and you have 10 units, and you simply divide it by 10. And so you say everybody's responsible for paying $50 this month for water because our bill was $500. And that's the essence of RUBS. There's a little bit more nuances there you can get into, like you can say number of people in the home versus just the simple unit, but that's kind of the gist of it. So I wanted to explain that because now that I'm going into a little bit more of like the math sides in a second, I think we'll have a little bit more of that foundation. So this what we look for. This is very personal to us. I think everybody you talk to in the space is going to be a little different on what they look for, but I think some of these are also relatively common. Real quick, the question just came in: are rubs preferred by tenants? I would say I think tenants generally prefer sub-metering because they can see what they're doing. I think, to be totally honest, I think if everybody's paying the same, they get, and we have complaints, honestly, because one of our parks is we're doing rubs, and we got some complaints that somebody installed the washing machine, and so why am I paying the same amount of water that they are when they're obviously using a lot more? So that's the challenge with rubs. So I do think people prefer sub-metering. So what we look for, go ahead.
Even with rubs implemented in, so for the first Kansas park that was purchased, the previous owner was paying for all of the water. So it was a free for all basically for as far as water. So the bills went from, like in the summertime, it could be up to $1,500 for the water bill. Once we started rubs, now our average bills are anywhere from $500 to $600. So it helps conserve on water, for sure, helps save money in the end, good for the environment. But like Brett was saying, if you have some really watchful eyes in the park, and so if somebody has left their water running and they're watering their little area of the lawn, whatever it is, they're concerned that they are paying a percentage of whatever the neighbors are doing. That can become an issue. So I think that, the sub-metering is where we're going with all of these eventually, for sure.
So the part of the reason why we have this specific criteria is because, and you'll find when you start looking for, like, if you decide to go all in and buy mobile home parks and you want to find them, you sign up for a bunch of brokerage lists, wholesaler lists, and then you start telling your friends and family you're interested in. I promise you're going to get several deals, like every day. You're going to get a bunch of deals. And it's too time consuming to look at every single one. So if you have some strict criteria, it makes it really easy to just ignore the ones that don't make sense for you. So this first column is kind of our easiest way to say no to things. So market strength, we test this by going to bestplaces.net. This is a great site if you want to even pull it up right now and just look at your own city. It's pretty cool because it'll show you the city and then it'll show you the metro area. So for example, I know a lot of folks are in San Jose. If you looked up, and I'll just do it right now, and I'm not going to share my screen for this, but I'll just kind of say what it's showing me. So if I look up San Jose, I can see just within San Jose, we've got over 1 million people in the population. Median home price is $1 million. Boise's catching up, by the way. It's kind of crazy. Like I said at the beginning, I used to live in the San Jose area, and it's like, I can't believe how much we're catching up. And the median income is $84,000. So obviously San Jose is a fantastic market, but that's just San Jose. You can go up a level and do Santa Clara County or San Jose Sun Valley, San Jose Sunnyvale metro area, and it gets even bigger. So we're looking for, it needs to be a large population of at least 100,000. Median income needs to be about 50K. Ideally, we'll be okay if it's a little lower than that. That's not the most important metric, but 50K. And then 100K median home price. And the reason for that is if we're selling a mobile home for 40 to 50,000, some of them, honestly, you can buy a mobile home for 150,000. There's some really nice mobile homes you can get. So we need to make sure that the competing mobile homes are also at least 100,000. I'm sorry, the competing single family homes are at least 100,000 if we're going to be able to offer manufactured homes for less than that. Cooperative municipalities is sort of like a blanket statement on a few things. There are certain states that we've sort of decided that, at least for now, where we're at in our investment careers, we're going to ignore certain states and certain areas just because of policies. So for example, we love Iowa, we love Kansas, Missouri, we're looking at Indiana and Nebraska. If you know that vicinity, you probably noticed I skipped Illinois. Illinois has some really challenging laws that are not really great for owners. And actually, they're not great for residents either with taxes. There's a lot of people, if you look at articles, a lot of people leaving Illinois and going to Indiana and Iowa. So we look for that. The other piece about the cooperative municipalities, and this is something Ryan is really passionate about, loves doing, is actually coordinating with zoning and making sure that they don't have crazy rules. For example, some common things we've seen is if you remove a home or if a home leaves, you can't replace it, which can be crazy because you could have a 30 lot community, and if one home leaves, suddenly you only have a 29 lot community. So you got to be really careful when you're buying to make sure you're not in a situation like that, because every time a home leaves, you're not going to be able to. And you think about it, those homes aren't going to last forever. So eventually that mobile home park is going to be dwindling. The other, like another example of things we watch out for is like age limits. So some of the communities that we look at we can't sell a brand new home. So what we like to do is bring in something from like 1990s or 2000 and remodel them so they're brand new, and sell them. But there's certain cities, like usually smaller cities, that won't allow you to bring in a home that's older than 10 years. So that's just some examples of some things to watch for. This middle one, again, this is very much just us. We want to be within a 3-hour drive of Kansas City or Boise. And Boise is, of course, where we live. So we have a couple parks south of us in Sun Valley, Idaho. And then Kansas City, as I mentioned before, we have a really strong property management, maintenance, and rehab crew. Several people all located in Kansas City. In fact, for our Iowa acquisition, our rehab crew is actually going to go live on site in Des Moines for a few months and rehab all of the homes that are up there. So jumping to a completely new market is not really a great option for us right now, because we just have such a strong team there. So we really try to keep there. So if I see something in Florida or Arizona, I try really hard to not be distracted by it, because this market makes no sense for us. That doesn't mean you need to follow that. That's just kind of for us. We found that works the best. And then we try to look at parks that are at least 50 lots. But if it's a brand new market that we haven't expanded to before, like Wichita, Kansas is something we're interested in, we would want more than 50 lots because it would be the first expansion there. But if it's Des Moines, we probably would be okay with 20 or 30 because we're already there. So it just kind of depends on the market there too. And then again, this is another one that's just big for us. We want value add. So if I see a park that is 95% occupied and in a super great market and all those kinds of things, I'm probably going to pass on it because I want to be able to come in and improve it. It's sort of like if you're trying to buy a single family home as a rehab, you want to get something that's messed up and that smells and is ugly and nobody else wants to buy it. That's sort of what we're looking for the mobile home parks. That's not completely true. We buy some nice ones, but that's often what we're trying to get is the ones that we can fix up. Our strength is really this infill piece. We love finding parks that are in great locations, great condition, but the previous managers just didn't bring in new homes. And then we can come in and increase the value quite a bit. And then utilities aren't built back, which we talked about already with RUBS. It's actually pretty common that people aren't already building back the utilities. This slide, Ryan, I feel like I'm talking a lot. Do you want to cover this slide?
Yeah. Do you want to go back real quick?
Sure.
I just wanted to mention, like the market strength piece. There are some people that 50,000 plus in population in a metro is fine.
That's true.
40,000 median income is fine. You have to find what's comfortable for you, and also know that on best places, as you're looking up certain cities or towns, where they cut off the metro area might be actually pretty close to a metro. It might be a state line, something like that. So you need to dive in a little bit deeper. So like if you look at our Chariton Osceola, they don't show Des Moines as the metro area, but Des Moines is actually closer than some of the other towns or cities that we've looked at that are near a large, so here's what best place looks like. So, this is whenever Brett sends me a new deal or email or whatever, this is the first thing I do is go in here, punch in the city, then I look at Google Maps and see how close it actually is to a metro area. Because of where those lines are cut off, sometimes it just doesn't quite make sense. So just be aware of that. You need to do a few steps, but
I'll give an example here actually that's real time. We're looking at a park right now that's in Newton, Iowa, and I pulled it up yesterday because someone emailed us about it, and 15,000, even if I look at the Jasper County or even into the metro, that's still quite 40,000, but it's within 20 minutes of Des Moines. So to Ryan's point, that's not totally a deal breaker. You kind of want to look a little bit more into it, but we want to make sure that it's commutable to a big city for jobs, obviously.
Yep. And then we look at other stats. We'll get into that a little later, but you just have to figure out what your, your area, what you're comfortable looking for. And if there's something that comes across our email that says 100% occupied, and then we look at the market rents are close, or the rents are close to market rent, like we're really not interested or excited about that, just because of that value add piece. But some people are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some people that do really well with the fully occupied stuff. They get cheap financing and they do well with the cash flow. And it's low level of effort because it's already completely stabilized. So there's a question, Ryan, how do you find out about zoning rules?
Yeah, the planning and zoning is the best place to go on like the city website. With that said, some city, like we're dealing with one now in Kansas, that you can't find anything on the manufactured home communities and their rules and regulations around those. So you need to call. We start making calls. Luckily, our managers live in that same town, so they knew the gentleman who's in charge of it, and they have these other rules and regulations that aren't on their webpage but are actually in the city code. And so if you need to start digging in after you get past these initial, like, okay, it's checking off these marks, like less than 5 minutes, I can say, yeah, I'm interested in more. The planning and zoning commissioner, or going to their website and just doing a quick search for mobile home parks, mobile home communities, then you can quickly see if there's age restrictions. Basically, you can tell if that municipality is pro mobile home communities or they have a lot of fences built against them. But even with that said, you can start working with them. Like, everyone's looking for affordable housing. And if you're able to convince them that you're going to come in and take a mobile home community that's rough looking and turn it into something that can be a pride of the city and for the residents that live there, they're going to work with you. If you show that you're going to invest money with them, I'd say most of them are going to work with you. So that's the broad strokes for municipalities anyway.
And that can honestly be kind of rewarding when you come in and the municipalities want you to be there and want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll cover this side real quick. So again, some of this is our personal preference, but again, keep in mind, we're trying to be as laser focused on what works for us and not spend time on things that don't. So these are kind of the warning signs. So flood wave. Ryan's going to get into this a little later, but there's different types of flood zones, and a floodway is essentially designated for floods. Like it said, they've determined, the American Engineering Corps, forget the official name, but they've determined this location is meant for flood. You can't build fences there. If there's mobile homes there, like, they're not protected. So when we see that, we quickly walk away. And then challenging municipalities, we kind of got into that a little bit. So orange flags, these are things we'll look at if everything else looks good. Like if all of our other deal criteria is great and there's these orange flags, we will consider it for sure. So private utilities, what this means is there's a well for water or there's septic. Those are the kind of the most common private utilities. There's other private utilities like wastewater treatment plant, where they actually on site have their own wastewater treatment plant. And then another one that's a lagoon, which is essentially like it's routed to a small pond that's sort of naturally treated. The advantage of private utilities is they're actually very cheap to run. So you just want to make sure you're doing a very thorough due diligence and have a strong business plan for it, because the cap rate's going to be higher if you have private utilities. You want to make sure that you know that when you're selling in a few years or in 10 years or whatever, you're going to lose out on cap rate because of that. So just make sure you have kind of figured that out. Orangeburg pipes, these are pipes in the ground for sewage, I think for water too, Ryan? Do you use it for both? Sewage?
Yeah, sewage pipes. So they're essentially cardboard and infused with resin. They were, it was probably 40, 50 years ago, plus that they were installed. Some of their lifespans were 3 to 5 years. We've run into Orangeburg that is still in great shape. But historically they collapse, they degrade over time. So it's definitely something to be aware of. For example, in the Iowa parks, we had one of the parks that we knew had Orangeburg. we had it all scoped. So had the camera go down, had a company go in and evaluate them. And they've had Orangeburg replaced over time. And there's still a few sections, but those sections are in great shape. They still look just fine. So we'll probably do the same. We'll replace as they show some wear and tear. But in some places where it's a lot of Orangeburg, we might, depending on the CapEx, which is that next piece, that heavy CapEx, so capital expenditures, roads, putting in new piping, going from private utilities to, from like a lagoon to public sewer, those types of things. If people are not willing to give concessions or add that into how they evaluated the park, then that may be a no-go for us.
Yep. And the other thing I'll touch on with both of these is part of the business plan is making sure you have enough of a capital reserve that if something goes wrong, you can fix it. Our Orangeburg plan, so as Ryan mentioned, up in Iowa, one of our parks has some Orangeburg in it. So we investigated it all. We prioritized which pipes would get replaced and when. So just having a business plan can kind of mitigate any of that risk. And then the yellow flag is just, again, I don't actually think this is a warning sign to most people. This is just, again, kind of things not for us. Again, I mentioned this before. If it's a 100% occupancy, if the low cap rate, which is usually like below 5, so 4 or 5% cap rate, that's just going to be too expensive for us and something we can't get to cash flow or get returns on. Different market or too small is sort of again, what we we'll skip that on. Okay, so here's where we get into the fun math. So with traditional real estate on the right, I'm sorry, on the left, how I mentioned before, you would take income minus your operating expenses, get to net operating income. And then below that, you have your debt service or your mortgage payment, and then it's your cash flow. So with a mobile home park on the right, or mobile home community, the difference is you have this home income, and it's not part of your net operating income, but you still get the cash flow from it. So you would take lot rent income, lot rent expenses, and this is something you have to be careful of if something's heavily park-owned homes. You can't simply take away the home income. You also have to take away the home expenses, which is generally like if I see an expense that says HVAC or plumbing or maintenance. Maintenance can be either one, but most of that's going to be park-related or park-owned homes. So that all comes below the line. So it's not factored in with the valuation, but it still is better cash flow. So again, with valuing mobile home communities, you're going to take net operating income divided by capitalization rate gets you the value. So just as an example here, if you had a net operating income of $500,000 and the cap rate was 7%, then you're going to be at $7.1 million valuation. So just to give a real world example, in our Iowa portfolio that we keep referring to, we're paying $6.2 million for it, and it's a 6.6 cap. So you can back into what the net operating income is. And that's based on going in the actual numbers that they had for 2020. Obviously, our plan is to increase that. So our pro forma cap rate or the projected cap rate is much better than that, but the going in cap rate, we're just below 7%. Multifamily homes in. So our mobile home park cap rate similar to multifamily homes in similar location. So that's a good question. So just to rephrase that, if there was a multifamily apartment down the street from a mobile home park, would they trade at the same cap rate? It's hard to answer because there's so many factors that could go into it, like the quality, the occupancy, the size, all those kinds of things. But generally, what I've seen is, and this is coming from Capstone. Capstone's a large broker for mobile home parks. So is Marcus and Millichap, and so CBRE, and they publish quarterly reports. And generally, the cap rates are actually a little lower for mobile home parks than they are for multifamily, all things being equal. So if it's the same type of asset class, or I'm sorry, the same type of asset quality in the same location, you would actually see a lower cap rate on the mobile home park. And again, that's a couple of reasons why. The main one is that they're seen as easier assets to operate, especially if it's stabilized already. And then the other reason why is it has a lower operating expense ratio. So again, we were talking about 30 to 50%. With multifamily, especially if it's an older building, you're definitely going to be like 60% or more for expense ratio. So this is where we get really excited with infill. So if you think about capitalization rate and how to value out, how you increase value, for every $300 increase in monthly net operating income, if you look at this math, that's $300 a month times 12 months equals $3,600 in annual NOI that's added, and divided by a 7% capitalization rate, that's a $51,000 addition to your valuation. And so the reason we like buying mobile home communities that have vacancy is because every time we fill a vacancy, we increase the value by $50,000+. And that's if the lot rent's only $300. We have one park that the lot rent's $500, and the cap rate's actually lower.
That's below market rent by $100+ too.
Exactly, yeah. So it's more like $500 at a 6 cap. So every home in that park really increases the value. So again, if we see something that has like 100% occupancy, we think it's boring because we can't do this. So that's why for me, this is the main reason I like mobile home parks. It's a little bit like buying a 4-story apartment complex and adding 4 stories to it. You don't have to kick out any tenants. You're already getting all the cash flow from the first 4 stories, and you just get to build on top of that, which is pretty sweet. So it's more cash flow, more value, all of that. This is a lot of detail on this slide, but what I wanted to show here is an actual pro forma. So pro forma is where you take T12 stands for trending 12 or trailing 12. So these are actual numbers that, this is from our Iowa portfolio, by the way. So these are the actual income and expenses that they had in Iowa. And then this is our projections for how we're going to be doing it. So a couple of things I wanted to show you, and again, don't want to get into tons of detail here, but you've got all of your income lines are up here at the top, and then net operating income is here. We have reserves, our debt service, and then any rent to own income is down here, or lease to own income is down here. So this is our NOI going forward, and then you can see the cash flow that will go out to all of our investors. Couple of things I want to point out. When I look at a T12 or a profit and loss statement, so when you're trying to value a park, you always want to make sure you're getting a couple of things. You want to ask for the rent roll, which is a list of all of the sites. So if you have 20 parks or 20 sites in a park, you should get a rent roll with all 20 that says what's going on in each. So it should say vacant home, or Ryan Hill is located here, or whatever. And it should show how much rent they're paying. That's one thing. The other thing you should get is financials. So that can come in the form of a T12, which is monthly, or P&L, which is an annual statement. So when I look through this, I really try to make sure I'm breaking out lot income versus actual or versus home. And then I also look for line items down here that just really don't make sense. So a few things I didn't even bring them over to this version. So for example, they had some automobile charges. They were paying for their own cell phones. They have office supplies and tenant screenings. So they have a $2,000 tenant screening. We pay for that ourselves out of our partnership, not out of the park expenses. So things like that are removed. So from that alone, you can get to the point where your NOI is maybe a little bit better, because you're looking at taking their actuals, but how you would have done it had you owned it for that year is sort of that first step. And then from there, generally, I'm going line by line and either getting estimates, like if it's insurance, I'm getting an actual quote on the insurance, or if it's utilities, I'm gonna estimate an increase. In this case, I think we increased it by 2% year over year. And then a few things like that you're just kind of line by line, you're kind of projecting how much more is this going to cost us next year versus how they did it this last year. In the income lines, a couple of things that I wanted to show real quick. Sorry, Ryan just texted me to unmute. Am I muted? Oh, okay. Sorry, Ryan is muted, and he needs me to unmute him. So
there you go. Thanks.
There we go. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to point out. If you notice, potential lot rent for last year was $660. Next year we have it going to $782. Huge jump, right? So the reason for that is the sellers of this portfolio already increased rent by 5% in March. So we're benefiting, even though we went under contract in February, we get to benefit from a rent increase that we didn't have to do. So already we're getting more income from that. The other thing is we're projecting that we're going to add 24 new homes. So you're going to have 24 new homes in the first year that's also going to increase your income. And then in year 2, we're adding in the RUBS, the rental utility bill back system. The reality is we'll probably do a mix of mostly submetering, but I have that adding in year 2. And the reason for that is you don't necessarily want to do a big rent increase and rubs at the same time, because that's really hard for residents to sustain. So anyway, just a few things there. I feel like I'm going into more detail here than I probably should, but let me look and see if we've got any questions here.
Yeah, my rent growth estimate similar to multifamily.
I would say that the market rent is similar. But from what I've seen, comparing multifamily and mobile home parks, I think mobile home parks are generally below market more than multifamily is. So the market rent being like what's the actual rent should be, I think is relatively similar pace. But you have a little more opportunity to increase the rents on mobile home parks because they haven't been kept up with over time. So what we do, like, for example, this pro forma I'm showing you, it's on average $100 under market rents. We only increase rents about 5 to 10% in any given year. So it will take us 4 or 5 years to get caught up on that $100 gap. And we're okay with that because we're not planning to sell it for a while. And it just makes sure we have enough buffer for what they could get somewhere else. And just, we think it's wrong to increase rents too much. That's kind of our personal opinion. Continuing to move forward. Looks like we had one more question.
Yeah. So the RUBS / submetering will happen at the same time. So we're not going to ask residents to start paying before, like it won't necessarily be a mix for a park. We'll put submeters all in one park. We may have another park that's doing RUBS. So but usually RUBS comes before submetering just because that's just an equation, right? It's not actually putting in submeters.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here on the deck. So give me just a second. And sorry, we were definitely talking more than we had anticipated. So if anybody needs to drop, we won't be too offended. We are recording it, so we'll send this out. And if you registered, actually, you should get the email automatically when it's recorded. But so Ryan, testing market strength.
Yeah, I'll go through this quick. So we talked about this already a little bit. One thing, so a lesson learned recently, there was a mobile home community that we went into. I don't know, I spent several hours going back and forth with a wholesaler, talking about the deal or potential deal. And when I finally remembered, hey, I should go to the FEMA website, punch in the address. Well, most of the park is in a floodway, which is actually moving, like that's moving water. Like the river becomes, your park is now in the river, basically. Versus like if it's the floodplain where water's kind of seeping out, but it's not running, more of the typical flood that you may think of. So if we had done that early on, it would have been a no-go. We would have saved a whole bunch of time, that type of thing. Some people have nothing to do with private utilities. So they hear private utilities, they run. That's what some of the boot camps, they say public utilities are the best. You should only go with public utilities. Once you understand the private utilities, though, it doesn't really scare you away as much. So those are our quick evaluations, longer than 5 minutes. So those are the ones you can do really quick and say, yep, I want to dig in deeper, or no. Rent comps. So I'm also looking on best places for rent comps initially. So I'm looking at single family and apartment rents. So if for a 3-bedroom, ideally, I'd like to see that at or above $1,000 a month. Knowing that our rents aren't necessarily going to compete with that right away, even for a park-owned home that might be at $750 to $800. And then a 2-bedroom, you want $750, maybe $800 or higher. We're looking at offenders, sex offenders, that type of stuff in the park, crime rate in the area. You just have to figure out your own comfort level with that. And then employee diversity is a big one. So we'll jump into that here in the next slides as well. So for example, Des Moines, largest MSA in Iowa, there's a few of the stats there. Big population, median income is high. And also knowing where the growth area is. So West Des Moines, where our Boonville property is, it's right in the path of all of that development. We have housing development across the street that's in the 500, $500,000 range for homes, property values. And that's where the growth is going, West Des Moines into that space. So knowing where the growth area is going to be important as well, but a very strong market, as well as next one.
Sorry, it's like
You're
not
good.
with me today.
So Cedar Rapids is the second largest MSA, and that's where our Tipton Park is, not far from Cedar Rapids. So strong population, strong income, growing market. They have a regional airport, large regional airport that just went in. It's getting larger as well. So just knowing the diversity of the economy in those areas is going to be important. And next slide. You don't want a one-trick pony. So if you have one major employer in MSA or in the town that potentially could shut down, that may be a warning flag. So both Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, obviously pretty diverse employment. Hy-Vee is a huge grocery store chain in the area there.
Like a Safeway or Kirkland.
Yeah, Safeway, Albertsons, those types of things. Actually, one of our parks is built right behind a huge, what is it? It's a distribution
center.
A distribution center for Hy-Vee in Iowa. So just being aware of the employers is going to be important. You'd like to see some type of community college, a number of different types of industries in the area that are going to be more attractive than not, obviously. When we test the demand for either rentals or sales, Facebook Marketplace is where we've been testing those ads. So, Craigslist, we've tried it there too. I've tried both the exact same ad in both locations. And I'd say it's 10 to 20x the response on Facebook Marketplace every time I've done that. So we'll put a generic ad on, and so it says like Chariton, Iowa. It doesn't give the specific park name. So it's pretty generic, 2-3 bedroom home for sale or rent, from $750 a month. So you give some type of price range maybe. What's important on Facebook Marketplace, if you put a phone number, like just the straight number, it's going to block it. It's not going to show. So you need to be a little creative. So that's why you can kind of see it down there. It's like 515. Then I spelled out the word 9 instead of a 0. I put in the letter O. Then it will show up, and most people will kind of figure that out. So we used a service called Project Broadcast. So if people actually follow directions on texting for this one, Lucas County, to that phone number, it's like $10 a month to create a new phone number, and you can cancel it after you're done with your test ad. It goes to that bottom track with Project Broadcast. You can set up an automated message with a picture, an image that goes back to the person. And what's kind of nice about that, you can set it to respond 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, whatever you choose. So it doesn't seem like a robot's responding the second after they hit send on that. Most people will still do the built-in, is this still available? If you've ever used Facebook Marketplace, you can see that there's just those automated responses. So if they do choose that, I send them the same link as they would get through Project Broadcast, which is to a Google form. And I'll explain why we're looking for people to actually enter information into that Google form, because it's more than just, is this available? And then that's all you hear from them. It's probably not a serious person that's necessarily looking for a home to rent or purchase. So go ahead to the next slide. And we ask a series of questions in there. So what would you prefer? Would you prefer to rent to own, purchase with a mortgage? So we get an idea for, and they can choose multiple of those choices as well. One thing that I'd like to add is just like a general credit score. What's your credit score? Just to kind of see the percentage of people responding, how many of them would qualify through a 21st or a PEP, it's another mortgage company that can finance manufactured homes. So this was a 48-hour results for our Iowa portfolio. So what we're looking for is 1.5 per day responses on that Google Doc or through Project Broadcast. So they've interacted with us more than just, is this available? So 3 over 48 hours is going to be an indicator of a strong market. This industry standard is about 10 interactions outside of the views and Messenger in 7 days. So we just did the quick math on that. We were getting crazy responses on all of the parks, really. So we just shut it down after 48 hours. But those were our results. And I did include the Facebook views on there as well, and the messengers just to show the strength of market. But even for country estates, which are lower numbers overall for the broadcast tags and the Google form completion, still over our threshold of showing that it's a strong market.
Looks like our icons didn't pull over, but
yeah. Do you have this one?
Yeah, so this is just kind of quick overview of what we had for Iowa. So again, total of 273 lots across the portfolio. We actually found Prairie Village had more like 90 lots, so it's much better than 273, which is fantastic because, as you saw before, more homes we infill, the better value. And then these are the actual numbers that are occupied. So about 180 have residents in them, so homes and residents. There's about 15 more that have homes on them that aren't occupiable yet. They need to be rehabbed, which is fantastic because we've got a great rehab group, and then we'll be able to get those sold. And then just a couple other opportunities we saw here that we liked was the lot rent was below market, and we have this number that I'm showing here are actually the net opportunities to increase water bill back or utility bill back in general per month per site. The Tipton Park that we're buying already does direct billing, so there's no opportunity there. But on average, that's a $57 per lot increase in net operating income that we can add. And then the markets are strong. You can see from the median home prices that we looked at. Sheridan was a little lower than we like to see for the median home prices. Again, these are single family homes that are selling for these prices, so Sheridan's a little weaker, but that's just a market we'll need to make sure that we're buying a little more used homes and rehabbing them to be more in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, where Prairie Village, we can bring in some brand new homes that will sell really well. So here's an example of a deal we passed on.
Yeah, so I explained this a little earlier. It was in Topeka. And so in that red area, it's kind of hard to see, but that is where the mobile home community is. You can see a majority of that's in the floodway, and all of it is in a floodplain. So like I said, if we had typed that address in and saw it in that first 5 minutes, it would have saved us hours of looking into it deeper, because that's just a no-go for us.
Yeah, I couldn't believe we spent weeks, really, like a few hours each week looking and negotiating and talking, and then we missed this. This was like an easy no if we had noticed it. So,
do you want to talk about the Mesa one at all, or?
Yeah, the Mesa one looked at recently. There were actually 2 deals in Mesa. I mean, the big thing about Mesa, it's not in our core market, so I wasn't really interested in the first place. But had a couple people actually from the Apple real estate group, for those of you that are at Apple, that were interested in Mesa and had already had some investments there. So I thought it could work out with some scale. But there just wasn't enough opportunity to increase the value. That they were fully occupied. The rents were close to market, so there just wasn't really a whole lot of upside. It would have been a nice cash flow play, but that's not really what we're personally interested in. We like cash flow, don't get me wrong, but we want also that upside. So last slide, we kind of want to talk about investment and buying opportunities. I called this investment options, but it's really how you can buy. So there's really 3 basic ways to buy a mobile home park. You can go solo, buy it by yourself. The advantage of that is you've got 100% of the ownership and 100% of the upside, 100% of the cash flow. It's all yours. The downside is you also have 100% of the risk and 100% of the responsibilities. What I mean by risk in this context is when you're going alone, you're signing on the loan by yourself and you're risking your money by yourself. So it's just your money and you're risking the loan. So your risk is you could risk your entire investment and you potentially could go like through a bankruptcy if something goes really south and you've signed on recourse debt, which actually is very common in mobile home park space and even multifamily space. I know a lot of times we hear that if you're buying commercial, you don't have to do recourse debt, but it's actually much more common than you would think. Joint venture is another great option. This is how Ryan and I got started with joint ventures. So you team up with 2 or 3 partners. So there's 3 or 4 of you involved. I would say much more than 3 or 4 gets to be a little too much going on in a joint venture situation. But what's nice about this, I mean, the downside is you split the equity because it's not all yours, but the upside is you're spreading the risk and the responsibility. So for those of us that have day jobs, it's hard to do the going solo by yourself, but you can do a joint venture a little bit more easily as long as you have really clear roles and responsibilities. Ryan and I, it worked out really well for us because what I like and what I enjoy and what I don't like are very different from what Ryan likes and enjoys and what he doesn't like to do. So that kind of made it really easy for us to split up what each of us does. And then the final option that's pretty common is doing a passive partnership. So this is also referred to as a syndication. And in this case, you can be a limited partner where your risk, it's called limited partnership because your risk is limited to your investment. You have no other risk. There's no lawsuits. You can't be sued. You can't go bankrupt, anything like that. General partners that are the more active people in the deal are the ones signing on the recourse debt. So they're the ones taking the extra risk. And they're the ones responsible for all of the business plan and action items and all that kind of stuff. So we've done, well, Ryan went solo on one park. So I can say we, including Ryan, have done all of these. I've only done these 2. And I've been a passive partner in several syndications as well as sponsoring, obviously, the Iowa deal and the Missouri deal we're talking about now. I think that is our last slide. So this is kind of our contact information. There's a lot of questions in the chat that I can address real quick, but please feel free to drop any more questions in the chat now that you know that this is the final slide. If there's anything we didn't get to, please let us know. So a couple quick things. Do we have any data on mobile home parks growth over the years? The quick answer is I don't have that offhand, but there's definitely a lot of data we can get from the big brokerage firms that I alluded to earlier, like CBRE, Northmark, and Capstone all publish reports. In fact, I think I just saw quarterly reports last week from a couple of them. So that's something I'm happy to share. If you wouldn't mind just emailing me, because I don't have your email address, I can reply back with that. So again, just the Brett at HBR Cap that's shown there. Next question, what is the age demographics living in these mobile home parks? It varies quite a bit. There's actually some really nice mobile home parks that are restricted to 55 plus communities. Those trade at some of the lowest cap rates because they're all tenant owned. It's an older demographic, so they're safer. They're taken care of better. So that's a great one. The parks we buy, really the ages range quite a bit. And a lot of the tenants have been there 10, 20, 30 years. We have some that actually 30 years they've been in their same mobile home, which is pretty fascinating. So really it's all over the board on the ages. Is the property manager on site? So that depends on the business plan for us. And it depends on the size of the park too, by the way. What we like to do is we have what's called a greeter that lives on site. And the reason they're called a greeter is because they're not really the property manager. The greeter is responsible for kind of enforcing rules, reporting violations. They may follow up if someone's really behind on rent, but mostly they're kind of there to kind of keep things in order, more or less. So they're not doing any bookkeeping. They're not collecting rent. They're not like, they don't see anything to do with any of the financials. And then, so we have one person on site at each of our parks that's that role. And they're generally paid really like, it's like lot rent and maybe $10 per pad. So that's not their full-time job. It's just kind of something where they're there to kind of be boots on the ground and help out. A lot of them also will help with maintenance, and you'll just pay extra for their hourly if they're doing like lawn mowing or rehabbing a home or things like that. And then we like to have a regional manager in place that we mentioned before. Her name's Kristen. She lives in Kansas City and can get to all of our parks within a 3-hour drive. And she's going to visit she visits each one of them every 4 to 5 weeks. And then we do all of the off-site management. And so I referred to earlier that a lot of the expenses that the sellers have, we don't count as park expenses because we cover them in our partnership. So a few of those things are like bookkeeping, tenant screening, property management software, things like that. We cover and manage ourselves, and we have contractors we work with that do a lot of that. So we have like a contracted bookkeeper, a part-time asset manager that helps us with stuff. And then I'm going to skip one question for just a second. The last question that I saw here was, do we get two-story homes? So in mobile home parks, you don't usually have a two-story home. I've seen them once or twice, but they're very, very rare. Mostly because if you think about transporting a home on the road, it's got to be able to go underneath lights and tunnels and things like that. But what is common is what's called the double wide. So the most common homes are going to be a single wide, but you'll see a double wide. Like if any of you were in elementary school and had portables at the school, that's generally a double wide mobile home that's there. It's two of them connected to each other. The other question, Ryan, I'm going to let you answer here. The question is, what are the good resources for learning more about mobile home parks?
Learning just about the business and
Yeah.
parks. Yeah, there's a number of podcasts that we recommend. So if you have a podcast app, just if you type in mobile home parks, there will be a few that come up. So mobile home parks in real life, it's MPL. It's with Ryan Norris. Probably the most realistic. It's not the Pollyanna view that some podcasters will give you. So he balances the positives with some of the challenging aspects of the industry. Ferd Nemeth, he's a newer podcaster. He's actually the lawyer we used for our Iowa deal. And so he is a lawyer, podcaster. He owns several mobile home communities as well in the Midwest. Frank Rolfe's podcast. Frank Rolfe's kind of the godfather of mobile home communities, and he runs the mobile home boot camp, mobile home university boot camp. So there's a lot of them out there that are great for learning more about the industry. So those are just a few. There's at least 10 that we listen to, and we send each other, hey, did you listen to this one? Did you hear this one? So that can be helpful. And then,
yeah, honestly, that's the best. Like, I think that's the best way to learn is just to subscribe to a couple of the podcasts and listen. Yeah. But yeah, there's some Facebook groups, which is probably what you were going to mention, right?
Yep. Yeah, the Facebook groups, there's 3 or 4 that a lot of us are in. So again, just type in mobile home parks, mobile home investing in Facebook, and those will pop up for you. Most people in the industry are like Brett and I, willing to share information. We're still learning as we go, but love sharing, love nerding out over everything mobile home community wise. And then let's see, top employers. It can be sometimes be helpful just to call City Hall and just you can call and learn about who are those employers. Google searches, obviously. A lot of the information we get, a lot of our deals we find from brokers, and so I think that's one of the questions is how do you kind of source these things? So we're looking at ones that are listed. We do have people cold calling for us. So we have a list of park owners, phone numbers, addresses. And so we have people that are making calls to those owners to see if they're interested in selling. And if they're not now, if they'd be interested in selling in sometime in the near future. So those are a couple of the main ways that we're finding the parks. Crexy, LoopNet, Mobile Home Park Store. There's a few sites that have them on there. If they're on those, typically they've been passed over by quite a few people. So developing relationships with brokers is something that Brett and I have found really helpful as well. Is they'll send you or give you a heads up, hey, listing this one today or about to list this one. Sometimes they'll send you deals that they haven't even listed yet.
So if you look at the comments, I've been trying to take some notes on a few of the things. So I listed a couple of the podcasts and a couple of the Facebook groups that we really like. If you're just starting and you want to kind of start seeing some deals, I would recommend starting with Crexi, CREXI. It's commercial real estate exchange. .com. And to Ryan's point, it's better to get off market or to go direct to a broker. But what's nice about Crexi is you can go in and sign up for alerts. So I've gone in and I've made sure that I'm only getting mobile home parks for states that I'm interested in. And you can set it to like get them as soon as they post or get like one batch for every day. So I think that's a great way to start and then just kind of build your network of sourcing from there.
And the other one is developing relationships with wholesalers who you'll meet as you start networking in the industry or looking at the Facebook pages. I'm just looking at my text messages. Within the last couple hours, we had wholesaler I talked to 3-4 months ago who just sent a possible deal in the Kansas City area, and then our regional manager text Brett and I just a few minutes ago, sending us 4 different parks to look at as well. So once you start getting people to look for those deals for you, and they kind of know what you're looking for, that helps save you time in the end as well. Current offerings. You want to talk through that a little bit, Brett?
Yeah, so I'm actually responding to that over chat too. So I'll post a link in a second that you can check out. So we have a little bit more availability on our Iowa portfolio. So we basically have raised, we're about 85-90% subscribed on that, meaning we've got enough to close and we've got about half of our capital budget. And we're looking for a little bit more to supplement the home purchasing and rehab budget. So we do have a little bit more space on that, and I'll post a link that'll kind of have all the details in it, and you can reach out afterward if you're interested or have questions. And then we're putting together that Missouri portfolio now, and so that should be ready in the next couple of weeks. If you're interested in Missouri or Iowa, really, I would recommend following this link I'm about to post either way, and just if you sign up for, I think it's unfortunate because I think the link says invest now, but you don't actually have to invest. But if you click on that, you can set up a portfolio on our page, which will set you up to get emails, and you can start seeing any of our offerings that we have posted as well.
Dan had a good question. What standard rules, policies, screening criteria do you implement? So we do have general rules, policies that we implement at each park. And then as far as the screening, we utilize background, the checks for credit, checks for income. Then our managers also, we don't just go by that. Our manager, like our regional manager, we want them and our local managers to meet the people too, to get a sense for who they are. And, you know, if they're going to be a good fit for the community. But we do use Buildium is a tool that we use for rent collection, and it keeps track of if things need fixing, communication to a man. It's a pretty comprehensive rent managing software. And so it also, for people to pay, but it also has a screening, automatic screening that people, they just pay their $30 or $35, and it gives us all their information as far as background checks.
Were those all the questions? I'm not sure if I saw any others. I did post the link to the specific offering, but you can also just go to hbrcap.com, and you'll see more details on us, the properties, and there's a link there that will also take you to our investment portal. We use a portal called Syndication Pro. It's a third-party software, so it's a different site, but it links from hbrcap.com. So, well, this has been fun. I've really enjoyed talking to everybody and kind of walking through this. Honestly, it's one of our favorite topics, so we could totally geek out and nerd out. So please take us up on the offer to reach out with other questions. And truthfully, if you have a deal you want to, even if you want to go solo on it, you don't need our help on it, but you just want to kind of some advice, we're happy to help in any way. So just feel free to send it to us. We can let you know what we think or give you any tips on that. And yeah, with that, I hope all of you have a great night. And thanks again for your time and for joining us. So, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.